liked at the end that you touched on the idea that the current like builders can't build fast enough, like we can't build our way out of this, and that of course would be building on the outskirts. Is, I guess, your opinion or Strong Town's opinion that the regulations that stop small, cottage houses like on existing properties or secondary suites or whatever, is getting rid of those regulations would help address that problem so that builders can not keep building, but maybe build better, and that other people can kind of come in and pick up some of the slack?
Very much so, yeah. And that we're right at the precipice of, I think, a really important shift. I mean, the city of Calgary has taken action, Vancouver, but our municipalities are grappling, how do we handle sort of the onslaught, which will happen citywide, but not in any given neighborhood, of requests, hey, can I build something for my mother-in-law in the backyard? I want to add on to I want to turn my garage into a more proper garage conversion. When I was in the mayor's office in the city of Surrey, one of the things that they were always grappling with is that the building inspectors knew that the moment that they had given final approval, the decks would all be converted into housing. And the decks would be converted, and wherever there was a large balcony, that would all of a sudden be converted into additional rooms, into additional units. And one of the complaints was, well, this just can't be. They're not following the rules. But the flip side was they were addressing a need that was latent and building within the community. And so what's been interesting is the recognition. If we can do things in a way that ensures that proper building codes are being met, a lot of it, our dream would be that in most places, you can walk into a city hall at 9 in the morning with a 9th grade education and leave at noon with a building permit in hand. What that would do is that would also eliminate many of the disadvantages that small scale developers have, because to hold a piece of property for anything longer than a minute means you're adding cost and cost and cost, which for the big developers, they just apportion that over the larger swath of land. They've got an institutional investor. They're not in the same state as the person that is just saying, like, I'm barely in. I'm going to make this first one work, because once I build the first one, it allows me to get started on the next one. I begin that process. One of the exciting things that nonprofits are doing in some places that are beginning to liberalize their rules around this is nonprofits are stepping up and saying, we're going to build the first 2 or 3 triplexes in a neighborhood. Because the banks aren't lending to allow triplexes to be built because there's no comparables. They're only single family homes. And so the nonprofits are stepping up. With South Bend, Indiana has done this, Kalamazoo, Michigan, and they said, we will build the first. And these become the comparables that then everybody else is able to take to the realtors and to the bankers and say, see, we've got product. And this product is something that is now recognizable. One of the other great challenges is that the suburban experiment did something really well, which was replicate the same type of building pattern over and over and over again. There might be a little bit of a difference between stucco and shingles or stucco and siding, but otherwise it was largely the same sort of layouts and geometries that you see from the airplane. The challenge that our building departments have is to grapple with the irregular but wonderful. You go to Kensington Market in Toronto, it's a goofy little area, but it's wonderful. You've got spaces like this around here, and so the irregular is actually part of the joy, the delight. Jane Jacobs would say, like, this is part of the human spirit on display, and in so many areas, because of our desire to have everything be quite orderly, we've actually dumbed it down. And we've disadvantaged many of the people that are trying to fill an odd shape and make it just work a little bit better. Now, part of it, Strong Towns will readily say, you have to put up with some slop then. It's going to be not always as beautiful, as picturesque, as pristine as it might be, but truly, if it's meeting core human needs and if it can be adapted over time, we've got old buildings that went through an ugly stage, and then they got better. And we can hope the same, for you and for me as well. And so I think there's definitely, sorry, not you in particular, you're lovely, but just the ability to have our places, and again, to bring in those sort of organic metaphors, to evolve, to adapt, much like cells that begin to multiply, but instead what we had is a type of cell repetition, much like a cancer, that repeats a single type of cell and just like pulses that throughout the whole body, and then the body becomes really struggling in so many different ways. And so we are not like saying, one of the things that we would love to see is more of our suburban edge neighborhoods thicken and become a proper town center. Not a town with an E center, a proper town center where people can just gather. Sorry, you can have a town center, but that's with an E. I've never understood it, but that's okay. But just to be able to mature and thicken up in those ways. Yeah, here in front.
So cities are big on case studies.
Ooh,
and
yes.
I'm curious if there are any cities that you know of that meet the criteria, that meet the strong towns criteria yet. And specifically North America, that we can help model what we should do in Calgary.
Yeah, so the question is, are there any case studies of cities that have already gotten to the stage that we're describing? And the answer is, one, we get the question all the time, because people are like, okay, like where do we need to look because we want to be able to find the comparable and go here. In part because the question is, can we proceed on these types of principles? That our ancestors understood what it took to build lasting prosperity in places, and that we should continue to carry out or practice that way. We are working in 4 communities right now as part of our Community Action Lab. They are far from perfect, but they are beginning to make progress in different types of areas. So being more nimble in their city-making, decision-making process, really coming to terms with the fact Medicine Hat added 11 people in the last decade. But I don't think it was doubled. Edward would be able to. How much more land base? They added way more land base with a marginal increase in population. And the assumption or the analysis is that doesn't work. We also run a strongest town contest every year. And we always get dozens and dozens of applications, people saying, our community is strong in this way, but not in these ways. So the brief answer is not yet. But we're beginning to see every city that is cutting their parking requirements is a step in the right direction. Every city that is saying we can't keep fueling a highway building machine that's coursing right through the veins of our city and causing all of the energy to be carried out to the outskirts of the community without allowing it to settle down. I'm really fascinated by the idea even of permaculture, that in permaculture one of the core principles is to allow water to slow. And when you allow water to slow in a landscape, what it does is it prevents floods and deluges, but also droughts because there's more sustained access to water through seasons. Well, money actually works in much the same way. We need to slow down the speed of money in our community. We need to allow it to percolate within our neighborhoods, which is why your local coffee shop that's not a franchise is more likely to use a local accountant and put ads in the local paper and support the local school teams and do all of those types of things. And what it is much like in permaculture, you're damming up in small little ways the neighborhoods to allow the money to percolate and move within those places. And so shopping local is not just a moral thing. It's actually just better for everyone, but that's a whole other topic as well. But along the way, what we are always seeking is leadership that is willing to say, let's do small things, make lots of small bets rather than putting our hopes on some big bets. One of our community action labs is Norman, Oklahoma. So as we were working with them, I'm like, hey, what are the smaller things that you can be doing? The university and the mayor's office came up with a $1 billion stadium plan, which I know is a sore topic, maybe among some of you. As a Flames fan, I can't wait to go to, well, I guess it won't be the Saddle Dome anymore, but because I'm not paying for it, which is delightful. So I will pay for my ticket, but I'm not paying for anything else. That's for all you all. But I digress. Part of it is not to make these big speculative bets, but instead to say, how do we focus on using scarce resources really well? One other point around housing, and this is part of our predicament too, is that with record low interest rates for a sustained period of time, it was the equivalent of if you removed gravity from our current system of physics, so that you go for a season without gravity, and things get weird. Things have gotten really weird in the housing space. We have the challenge right now in Vancouver that many projects are on hiatus. Record high housing prices, but they've come down just a tiny little bit and people are stopping their projects. On the one hand, they've been asking the city for every type of concession, every type of thing to help them get to the stage of being ready to build. And now the moment that the market changes even the slightest, they either can't afford to or are unwilling to because they need a 20%, 25% return on their investment. Ashley Salvador, who is amazing as a council member up in Edmonton, but also as she's written for Strong Towns and been on our podcast. She's incredible. But her master's thesis looked at laneway suites, or I think they call them garden suites in Edmonton. And what was striking about it from a strong town's perspective, we would say this is the key, is that I believe it was almost 50% of the backyard garden suites that were constructed that she studied had no parking, that people who were in them didn't have a car, and I believe it was 60% of them were rented either at way below market rates or for free to family members or to others. And so what have we done for 30, 40 years to prevent that type of housing? Well, one of the things that we've done is that these are property owners in Edmonton that were willing to leave money on the table because that wasn't their primary objective. And yet they were providing hundreds, if not thousands of units for people to live in. The city of LA legalized accessory dwelling units. LA is not a strong town, but this is a good thing that they were able to do. They legalized accessory dwelling units, and now it is the fastest growing form of housing in the city. And it is directly contributing to more people being housed in their community. It is also attracting many more people because there's so much latent demand to enter into the city, which is one of the reasons why whenever people say, oh, housing prices haven't come down, therefore we need to stop what we're doing. I'm like, do you know how big the latent demand, how many people are living in basements that would rather have their own place? And so it will take time. We're going to have to keep working at this. But yeah, it's a great question. And we're always sensitive to it because we don't want to say, look at Houston, they don't have zoning because they have tons of other restrictions that basically do the same thing as zoning. We look at, it's not just small towns, they've got their problems as well. But Calgary, you guys are getting a lot right. But then I drive the Deerfoot and I see a lot of things that need some, there's been such a devotion to the movement of people at speed through your community. These massive one-ways that run through your downtown that could be converted tomorrow with cones and turned into a chaos for a week. And then you would have a remarkable emergence of new opportunities within the downtown and improved pedestrian experience and so much more. Yeah, towards the back.
So you come from Delta.
Yes.
I know that ideologically, Delta and Calgary are probably not too dissimilar from each other. When we talk about lots of projects, slowing down because of, dropping market at high interest rates, and we talk about how incremental changes can help take capital out of the equation and get more workers able to, take on these sorts of smaller projects for their communities. How do we make people not start, waving the red flag?
Waving the red flag that they don't want change in their neighborhood?
Or just the red scare type of flag?
So one of the things is, if I want to change my vehicle, nobody has a say in it. It just, I get a vehicle and it's got a lot louder exhaust pipe. It just happens. One of the things that we have hampered ourselves in, and this is very suburban, this did not happen before zoning was introduced, was the ability to weigh in on what your neighbor did with their property. I mean, this is the great, not in my backyard. Yeah, that's fine. Fine by me. Not in my backyard, no problem. But when they say not in my neighborhood, you say you don't own the neighborhood. Now, you have ownership in the neighborhood in the sense of being a citizen within it. But I think one of the things that the cities so the city of Delta, for example, they have realized that they were holding public hearings for projects that they actually, under law, didn't need to. And so they stopped holding hearings for projects that conformed with the OCP on some fairly significant levels of density, adding hundreds of homes in the community. They simply didn't have the public hearing. They didn't do the public notification, except to the immediate ones to say construction's going to happen. Not that much. There's no new red flags. There's just been this realization, things are happening. And one of the challenges that we have is that a lot of times people misunderstand what's happening in their neighborhood. In our city, and I'm sure this is happening here, single-family homes or single detached houses are being torn down and replaced with larger single detached houses that sell, $2 million, in our communities, $3 to $5 million. The last thing we need, like a hole in the head, is more $3 to $5 million homes. And yet that's the thing that when people see their neighborhood changing, it is because of all the contractors building stuff. So what if they were building cottage courts? What if they were building accessory dwelling units as a part of that mix? And that, I think, is something that is actually palatable in the community. And another element of it is that traffic is always people's objection, but people don't create traffic. It's the cars that they're in. And so we can begin to change development patterns to say, let's allow for more neighborhood retail, small scale pop-up shops. Part of the challenge is that a lot of our retailers don't want to play in a game where they have to limit their amount of square footage. And so we need a new class of entrepreneurs that are saying, I'll do a neighborhood grocery store, but don't mess me over by then allowing for a new big box store just a few miles up the road and making the whole thing a stroad to get there. This is, again, I mean, the whole question of congestion is really critical in this regard. The absence of congestion is a problem in a city that has gone dead. The presence of congestion in a city is actually one of the things that enables a contractor in one neighborhood to say, now I have fewer competitors in my neighborhood. So I actually can pick up more work in this neighborhood because Bob over there can't get here. He doesn't like driving to this part of the city. But when we accelerate the movement of vehicles through entire neighborhoods and make it easy to get from one side of the city to the other, in a sense, running with a stopwatch as fast as we can to get to the other side of the city, and Google Maps is really good at telling us the fastest way to do that, it actually limits the potential of local business and local opportunities. And so every time that we add more lanes to our freeways, one, it doesn't help in the longer run, but another thing is what it will do is it will give the Costcos, the Walmarts, the additional customer base that simultaneously wipes out the smaller players that could fill that niche. And so it's an economic development problem that is exacerbated by transportation decision making, where we've removed friction when that friction or congestion is actually the things that allows for neighborhoods to thicken up and begin to really emerge as a place that is worth being. Now, for the folks that want to raise the red flag, some folks are always going to raise red flags because they want everything to change. And so nothing to change. So we say our neighborhoods are changing. We have to decide, do we want them to be more exclusive and expensive or more inclusive and diverse? Or if those are trigger words for certain folks, we just say, do you want your neighborhood to be better? Do you want it to be better, and not just in the country club version, but in the way where you get to live a life that's really varied, that has a lot of options, that provides many things, not only for you, but also for your family members as well. We have seniors that are part of our housing advocacy group because they're like, I don't want my kids to move to Calgary. No offense. And I would say, no, you don't want them to move to Regina. That's what you don't want. Calgary's fine. It's a quick flight. So yeah, other thoughts or questions? And then for our host, so what time do we want to do? We are doing a James walk in the middle of the night over here. But we got a question, and then we'll, last question. All right, yeah.
Aside from accessory dwelling units, what can we do right now, aside from advocacy?
What you can do right now, I suspect there are a lot of people in this room that would be better able to answer that question than me because they know this current context. A very simple technical thing is to really push for the building code to be changed to allow point access buildings. That is single stairs rather than always requiring double stairs. There's a ton of reasons. I had one of the slides about this. That would be a technical way to do it. Another element of it is to begin to support every glimmer of good things that is coming out of your city council. I always say, like, be as supportive of your local city staff as well as your local city councilors, even if you're preparing to endorse their opponent. Like, be as supportive as you can up until the day when you're like, by the way, like, I wouldn't vote for you, but like, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, because their work is really critical. And right now, my sense is that you have a planning department, a city management that is really trying to press ahead. And so allowing your voice to be part of a chorus of people speaking up in these places. I was just at a public hearing in Delta the other night, speaking again. It feels like, every time I have to show up and say, yes, we want this. Yes, I want this. I said, I want this to be affordable for my son one day. Like, all of those voices, as well as speaking for those that have not yet entered into our city. We want our cities to grow in a managed way, but in a way that we can absorb people and have them become a part of the economic vitality and human vitality of our places. And so I think sometimes just speaking up in favor of those things goes a long ways as well. Does somebody have a burning thing that you want everybody to do tonight or tomorrow or the days to come? We'll close with that. A call to action from someone here in the crowd. All right, in the back, yes.
You didn't hear this.
I didn't hear it, but.
If there are enough of us, and we get a staff of pilots.
All right. I see where this is going. What about these tables?
You have to stop talking now.
Tactical urbanism is like wet paint. It's wonderful, but people get touchy about it. It can be really vibrant, especially in school zones. This is the whole unplanned modifications of various areas. we celebrated a guy in, I think it was in Charlotte, no, somewhere in the States, and he just all of a sudden installed more official looking pylons in an area where people were always cutting corners. And they just existed there. And people always assumed, oh, that must be official. And so I agree. You didn't hear it, well, I mean, we didn't hear it from either of us, but that is one of the things. I mean, don't be cautious not to take people's lives into your own hands, but at the same time, there's so many things. Even just park your vehicle a little bit further away from the curb. It'll slow vehicles down as they drive by. Or or make sure that if you're on a bicycle, that you're doing the things to pass people and giving them a decent amount of space, so that way they don't become the person that advocates against bicycle lanes because they had a bad experience one time. There's so many things like that. So great point. Look around your community, find the things that you can do, and let's go for a walk. I brought a coat because I thought it was going to be colder than Vancouver, and I was right. But thank you so much again. And yeah, strongtowns.org, come on and check us out, and keep supporting what you can in this community, and keep doing what you can to build a strong town. Thank you.